Welcome to Sound Bites, hosted by registered dietitian nutritionist Melissa Joy Dobbins. Let's delve into the science, the psychology, and the strategies behind good food and nutrition.
Hello and welcome back to the Sound Bites podcast. Today's episode is about all things seafood, the myths and barriers to consumption, the newly updated dietary guidelines for Americans, and some consumer insights and a lot of details about sustainability, and also the Eat Seafood America movement. I have two guests today, Dr. Paul Doremus and Linda Cornish. Dr. Paul Doremus is currently serving as the Acting Assistant Administrator for NOAA Fisheries. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a branch of the U.S. Department of Commerce that is responsible for the stewardship of the nation's ocean resources. He received his PhD in government from Cornell University and has over 20 years of experience in federal science, technology, and environmental policy and management. He is also currently serving as Vice Chair of the Seafood Nutrition Partnership Board of Directors. Linda Cornish is president of the Seafood Nutrition Partnership, which is a nonprofit organization inspiring a healthier America through a balanced diet that includes seafood, and is the trusted voice for seafood nutrition for the industry and the health and nutrition community. Linda received her MBA from UCLA. Paul and Linda, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Melissa. Great to be connected today.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I would love for both of you to take turns telling us a little bit more about your backgrounds and your work. Linda, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Well, Melissa, I have been a proponent for healthy eating for quite some time. And my background comes from, first, my education in UCLA, having an MBA and managing a number of different organizations. And just having a lifelong passion for health and wellness, have found my way to forming Seafood Nutrition Partnership about 8 years ago. This mission is meant to help Americans get healthier by eating seafood more often. And according to our scientists, it helps us to be happier and healthier. So I'm happy to just continue to be leading this effort and expanding it through our Eat Seafood America campaign.
Excellent. And Paul, would you like to share some more background information?
Thank you, Melissa. Sure. My formal training is in social science as a political economist, and I've been working in the federal sector for a number of years and since 2005 with NOAA, and certainly share Linda's enthusiasm for the health benefits of seafood. That is extraordinarily well documented and something that we are quite focused on making sure that we get the best available science out and support for people understanding the benefits of seafood consumption. But our line of work is really more on the production side of the equation, if you will. Our core business is focusing on the sustainable management of wild fisheries. We are also responsible for conserving and recovering protected resources in the marine environment, whales, dolphins, sea turtles. And our whole MO is to use science to make sure that we're doing the best job we possibly can in managing these natural resources for the benefit of humans, the benefit, in the case of fish, from consuming them, and all sorts of other economic and environmental benefits from having healthy oceans, both in terms of fish and other natural resources. We use science to help guide access to and use of these resources. That's the bottom line with what we do. And we've been really focusing on lately, and it's been a big focus of mine, to draw attention to the benefits of strengthening our ability to produce seafood by adding a stronger aquaculture component to our national seafood picture, if you will. And that's something we'll have an opportunity to talk about in the course of the call, but we really have a great opportunity to expand our production of safe, sustainable seafood through aquaculture, and we're doing a lot to try to help that happen in the federal world.
Excellent. Thank you. And I do want to say that this episode is not sponsored, but I did attend a virtual summit the Seafood Nutrition Partnership had. It was incredible. Very well done. All of the in-person summits have been changed to virtual, and the Seafood Nutrition Partnership, Linda, you guys did a phenomenal job of keeping that or making that interactive. And Paul, you spoke at that, and I was just really impressed with all the information. I also received a lovely gift of salmon for being one of the first people registered for a Seafood Nutrition Partnership webinar. So just in full disclosure.
Congratulations.
Oh, I enjoyed it very much. And I have pictures of it on Instagram if you want to check that out. I'll probably put the picture in the show notes too, because it was just a lovely. I did 2 different, I don't know if you call it recipes. I did one. My husband grilled it, but I did one with lemon and dill, and then I did one with lime and cilantro. It was really yummy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Those are really good combinations.
I'm sure I got those ideas from you guys because I'm not the most culinary person, I always say on this show. So let's start with the focus on seafood nutrition and then get into the sustainability in a little bit. But both of you feel free to chime in. I know you're both very well versed in all things seafood. Linda, maybe you could start off by sharing an overview of the benefits of eating seafood. I think most people know seafood is good for you, but there are some barriers and challenges that we want to break down so that we can get seafood on American tables more often. And people might be familiar with the Seafood Twice a Week campaign. And now we're going to talk about the Eat Seafood America as well. But yeah, if you could talk about the benefits and also clue us into what the newly released dietary guidelines say about seafood. And again, those myths and barriers, and would love to hear some consumer insights. So I know that's a lot, but you can kind of take that and share what you think is most important.
Sure. I know a lot of people understand that seafood is good for them to eat more often, but I think most people would be surprised about how good it is for them and how well studied in terms of science this area has been for the scientific community. There have been over 40,000 scientific studies since the 1970s on the benefits of eating seafood for heart health and more on the benefits for brain health. It definitely is something that we need to eat more often. Unfortunately, in the US, only 10 to 20% of Americans eat seafood twice a week. And so there's just a large number of Americans that we need to help educate and build awareness of the benefits of eating seafood more often. And just to continue on the health benefits, the seafood comes in just so many different varieties. There's over 500 different types of seafood, fish, finfish, shellfish available commercially. And they're filled with lean protein. They're high in vitamins, minerals, omega-3 fatty acids. And more importantly, these days, everyone is looking for immune boosting properties in their food. And so seafood checks all the boxes. It has, in addition to the omega-3s, vitamin D, selenium, iron, zinc. And those are nutrients that have been touted as immune boosting. And it was featured in one of our State of the Science Symposium webinars, where one of our scientist speakers said it really does help in our boosting of our immune system, especially now during COVID-19. And so it's definitely healthy, but I think the barriers for getting into eating seafood more is a lack of confidence in knowing how to prepare it, how to buy it, and how to make sure that you're not going to ruin it, before you bring it to the dinner table. But Melissa, what we found during this time of quarantine is that Americans have figured out how to cook seafood. And some of the reasons that we saw were that they were missing seafood at restaurants, with restaurants still partially closed and mostly open to takeout. Mm-hmm. Americans have figured out that, boy, if I want to eat seafood, I can try and add more seafood to my meals. And I think what's happened is we've got a large portion of our population at home, and they have more time to figure out how to make something they enjoy. So you've seen the different trends of making bread and trying different recipes. And so seafood has been a part of that trend. And so the trend to cook more seafood at home has grown. From the IRI research database that we follow, seafood sales at retail have grown anywhere from, at the start of the pandemic, about 30 to 50% year over year. And now it's probably leveled off to about 30% growth year over year. And so according to IRI, the fastest growing category for food since April 2020 has been seafood, consistently growing each month. And so it's been just such a fantastic silver lining out of all that we're going through, that people have figured out how to, add seafood more into their diets.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm that typical person who would more likely order seafood at a restaurant than cook it at home. And yes, we've seen with the pandemic, people are doing more cooking at home. So it's really exciting to hear that they're getting seafood at the retailers, at the grocery stores, and learning how to cook it at home. Because even though it is quite simple to cook seafood, you mentioned the lack of confidence. I think that really comes into play. And I know we're going to talk more about the barriers and some solutions. But I am that typical person. I mean, I'm also that person who will open a can of tuna, mix in some light mayonnaise or regular mayonnaise, and serve it on whole grain crackers. It can be that simple as well. But yeah, it's really great to hear that people are cooking more seafood at home.
I also think part of the reason for adding more seafood is that there is that variety.
Mm-hmm.
You after a while want to try different meals and make it more exciting. And so there's something for everybody. And the best way, for people to get into seafood, and we recommend is to find something that you're familiar with, whether it's burgers, hot dogs, salads, pizza, pasta. There's a seafood solution for it. You can have a fish burger, fish tacos, add some shrimp to your pasta. We've actually seen some innovations happen during this time. And so you'll find salmon hot dogs now, which are quite delicious. And just try different things. A lot of people are experimenting with cooking live lobsters at home, making lobster rolls. And then tuna, the canned tuna has had a resurgence as well. You can open a can and make your, wonderful tuna salad, but, be creative with it. Add some curry powder, add some, dill. You can really get creative with different flavors and spices. And I think as we continue on this quarantine, people are looking for more flavorful options to liven up their meal. So we're seeing that happen as well.
Absolutely. The variety. I mean, during the pandemic, I'm a pretty simple eater, simple cook. But, oh my gosh, got to a point where I really needed to shake things up and have some variety, because we get that when we go out to restaurants. We try something that we wouldn't make at home, or that we're, like you said, maybe not as confident. And we get a lot of variety in the restaurant setting. So definitely seeing that in my own home, like the cooking fatigue.
In light of the pandemic, the reason why we started Eat Seafood America was that, a lot of our partners in the seafood industry were looking for a way to generate consumer demand. A lot of the restaurants were closing, and that's where most of the seafood is sold in America. And so we rallied together with all of our partners to form a coalition to support the Eat Seafood America campaign. And this campaign is to have a call to action for all Americans to go out and buy seafood, eat seafood, and repeat. And in this way, they are helping their own health, as well as all the fishermen and seafood farmers that are working hard to provide our sustainable seafood. And this is a way for us to show support for them, because our seafood community and economy employs almost 2 million Americans. And so this is a way to help just so many people and ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to take more of a focus on breaking down those barriers. You mentioned buying seafood. We already talked about cooking, but even buying seafood sometimes can be daunting. And the information that you're putting out is just helping simplify things for consumers and giving them that confidence, and getting in the kitchen and trying something new. And your tip earlier of just, think of the typical dishes that you normally like and try it with seafood instead, or adding seafood to it. So, I think that that's just a really actionable tip. And then you mentioned variety, also the different types of seafood. Do you want to briefly talk about that? Some seafood are richer in omega-3s, and I know you have resources on that, but I think it would be nice to just hear about the variety of seafood, because I think that that's one of the recommendations, is my understanding, is from the new dietary guidelines, to have a variety. And, again, we talked about cooking fatigue and dining fatigue, and we need some variety, but there's a nutritional reason for that as well.
Yeah, for us to eat seafood more often, there's definitely a lot of variety. And in the new dietary guidelines that just came out last month, they recommend for the first time for moms to eat seafood before, during, and after pregnancy. And this dietary guideline has recommendations for kids 0 to 24 months for the first time. And so it's super exciting. And so for all the moms and families that are trying to get into seafood, you've got a fatty fish category. So there are tuna, salmon, sardines, mackerel. And so those are higher in omega-3s. You might try different preparations of grilling, marinating them with some lemon and garlic and basil or other spices that you like. And then you have the white fish. You've got Alaska pollock, haddock, hake, so many different varieties like cod and halibut. And those are in milder flavors, and they have a variety of nutrients as well. Some have higher omega-3s as well. You can definitely try different preparations that have milder flavors that are great for tacos. And so you can just try more of a lemon dill or salt and pepper, and just olive oil is even great. And then you have your shellfish categories of shrimp and lobster and crab. And those usually are great for steaming or on the grill, baked in the oven. And then lastly, you have your mollusks like oysters, which are great. Those are usually consumed in restaurants, but we've seen a lot of people try their hand at opening oysters as well at home. And so you can buy them a lot now direct from the oyster farms. And so there's a lot of different ways to bring all these different varieties home. We do want to encourage people to buy seafood wherever they can. You can order it direct from a seafood farm or oyster farm, a local catch as well, or other distributors that have online presence. Definitely go to your retailer, and don't forget to order pickup from your restaurants as well. There's just so many different places and options to get seafood more into your diet.
Yeah, and it can be like almost an entertainment aspect, can have a lot of fun with it, like the oysters and the lobster and that sort of a thing. So we were familiar with the eat seafood twice a week, but I think I've been hearing more too, is just eat seafood once more per week. And starting with that, can you share the actual recommendations for how many ounces a week we should be aiming for?
We should be aiming for at least 8 ounces of seafood per week. That breaks up to about 2 servings a week. For moms to be, the recommendation is for moms to eat between 8 to 12 ounces of seafood. So there's definitely, a lot of great options out there. That breaks up into about 250 milligrams of omega-3s per day is what the DGA is trying to have Americans consume from seafood. But seafood's more than just omega-3s. There's definitely lean protein and vitamins and minerals as well. That's really great for taking in a wonderful array of seafood.
Yes, and just one more thing before we get into the sustainability information. We talked about oysters and lobsters, and sometimes people can think, maybe it's kind of expensive, or if I don't know how to cook it, it's not going to turn out, and that might be a waste of money. But you also have a lot of great resources on budget-friendly tips, and certainly canned and frozen seafood counts. And, you mentioned different herbs and spices. We're seeing that in canned. One of my favorite canned tunas has basil flavoring. And so we're seeing a lot of variety there as well.
Yeah, so we do have a lot of resources on our website at seafoodnutrition.org. There are many recipes there that can feed families of 4 on a very economic level. And a series of recipes that we created were called Eating Heart Healthy, and they are $10 that feed a family of 4. Those recipes include canned seafood like canned tuna, canned crab, buying strategies to find fish on sale. And so you can definitely have a budget-friendly meal with seafood. What we like to say is there's a seafood option for you from $1 and up. And so we definitely want people to not be afraid to look out for it and to try it. And there's seafood usually in 3 sections of the supermarket. You've got the canned aisle with, all your canned varieties of tuna, salmon, trout. And definitely in the frozen section, there's more and more options that are ready to go that are seasoned and marinated. And so all you would need to do is open up the packet and put it in the oven, and you'll have dinner ready in about 20 minutes. And then you've got your fresh section, which has just a number of varieties as well. And the best thing to do is to work with your retailer, your grocery store that you know well, and build that relationship and understand their sustainable seafood policy and learn more from them. They are ready to help you with recipes and ideas. And we've also seen that a number of our grocery partners have made seafood ready to go with seasoning packets. And so, you can find them in the packaged aisle where it's already, prepared with some seasoning on top, and you would just need to stick them in the oven. Yeah, and there's also a lot of recipe cards as well as spices right by the seafood section to just give you ideas on how to bring seafood more into your dinner table.
Well, that's a good segue into the sustainability conversation. So we'll bring Paul into the conversation. I think first it would be helpful to explain for our listeners what sustainability means. What is sustainable seafood, and is U.S. seafood sustainable? Maybe you could share some of the common questions or concerns about sustainability. Like I know a lot of people are kind of confused about farmed fish versus wild and things like that.
Well, thank you, Melissa. And it's been wonderful to see the changes that Linda was recounting in the market as people have started to consume more seafood at home. And, a lot of this is driven by the types of health considerations that we've been discussing here, but consumers increasingly also want to understand the sustainability piece. Their food choices, whether seafood or other, they want it to be good for their health. They also want it to be good for planetary health. And that's where this whole matter of sustainability comes into people's minds. And often people do think about it differently based on whether it's a fish caught in the ocean or a fish farmed. And there's a lot of misperceptions around that. But the core concept of sustainability is one where the environmental impacts of producing the fish in this case are minimized. In the case of wild capture, it has a really, really distinct meaning that's actually embodied in law. We implement this through a law called the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which has this concept of maximum sustainable yield. And what that basically means is you don't take more fish out of the ocean than the ocean can reproduce and continue to grow in terms of fish stocks. So we in the United States have a very rigorous science-based approach for allowing specific numbers of fish by species, by region, to be taken out of the ocean. We do not harvest more than the ocean can naturally replenish. That's the core concept for sustainability. And if you buy a wild fish that was sourced in the United States, it is sustainable, no question about it. And that's one very simple answer that we like people to know, is that if you buy U.S.-produced seafood, it is sustainable. It's also sustainable from a farmed vantage point that has kind of a different meaning because it isn't an issue so much of managing the supply of a naturally produced species. It's more about making sure that the farms operate in a way that has minimal environmental impacts. They're clean, if you will, well monitored. They're using the right types of feed, and that they abide by a very rigorous set of essentially regulations that have to do with how the fish are managed, the density in a pen, and how their health considerations are managed, vaccines, things of that nature. All of that is also very tightly controlled by state and federal entities. So the consumer can have 100% confidence that farm products raised in the United States are sustainable as well. We have very rigorous regulatory machinery to ensure that that's the case. And by the way, producers, farmers, fishers, there's a very strong sustainability ethos in the business community that produces seafood. They are acutely aware they're producing food for people. Their livelihoods, their businesses depend on the future supplies, but also on delivering a healthy, safe product to consumers. So it's not as though, this is a forced equation, if you will. There's very complementary interests on the part of producers in the United States and on the part of entities like the National Fisheries Service that oversee the production of fish, there's a very strong complementary focus on sustainability and quality. And that's something that I think U.S. consumers would benefit from understanding more broadly. And I think that that would help them with their food choices as well.
Thank you. Yes. So aquaculture is fish agriculture, basically, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so that term might be new to some people. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. And so, I talk about agriculture a lot on the podcast, and the farmers, the fishers, as you said, they want to be sustainable and they work very hard to do that. So it's important for people to know that. And that's top line. And you can explain more specifically as we continue this conversation. But I wanted to make sure I understood, because you made a distinction that was kind of an aha for me to kind of simplify things. So if we're talking about wild fish, the focus is making sure that there's not overfishing. And if we're talking about farmed fish, it's making sure that the production practices are sustainable. Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because it can get confusing because there's a lot that goes into sustainability in general. Can you tell us some of the specifics? And maybe this is where we can touch on how much of the seafood that we eat in America is from the U.S. and how much is from other countries. And then what NOAA is doing specifically to support the aquaculture and the sustainability. And I also wanted to ask, we're focusing on U.S. seafood, but we do eat seafood from other countries. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the seafood from other countries is not sustainable, but it would depend on that particular source. Is that correct?
Yes. And it's a global marketplace for seafood. And to start with your original question about where our seafood comes from, a lot of folks don't realize that in the United States, we produce only a fraction of the seafood that we consume. Of all seafood products consumed in the United States, some 80+% is actually imported. And of that very large number, over half are farmed seafood products, so fish and shellfish and seaweed that are imported. So our focus is on the opportunity here to provide more diverse array of opportunities for coastal communities that depend on the ocean. We've seen more and more people looking at ways to complement their fishing businesses with aquaculture operations. So they're fishing and farming. And communities generally in the coastal zone were quite interested in seeing more diverse opportunities for their own economic development, and farming of seafood products is got great potential. We have in the United States a very strong aquaculture sector. It's, by our last count, around $1.5 billion worth of aquaculture products are produced in the United States. And while that sounds like a big number, it's a tiny fraction of the consumption in the United States. So most of our products coming from abroad, and most of it's farmed abroad. So our interest here in terms of aquaculture is twofold. One is on the production side with the sustainability piece. We have very high standards in the United States. We want that to be more clear to the consumer. We want those standards to operate more efficiently. So a big thing we're doing in Washington is trying to orchestrate the federal standards that apply to aquaculture production so that they operate more efficiently and aren't a barrier to producers who want to be able to grow products in the marine environment. And right now, that's a big barrier to aquaculture production. It's very hard to get a permit. We're trying to keep the standards high, but make the process easier to navigate and less costly. It takes years and an extraordinary amount of money to get approval for a permit. And that's not necessary. We can have high environmental standards and not make it so onerous and costly for businesses to be able to responsibly produce fish and shellfish and seaweed. It's a huge and growing market in seaweed in the United States. So we're trying to make the system work better from a regulatory point of view. And we're also trying to improve the science resources that industry has to draw on. Breeding technologies, the underlying science that informs animal health and nutrition, how to rear fish and shellfish successfully, have high survival rates, and have very well orchestrated and well managed processes all the way through. Feed and feed formulations, animal nutrition is a big, big thing where there's been enormous advances around aquaculture feeds that are healthy. They have high absorption rates, so they're consumed and formulated in a way that they meet the specific nutrition needs of each species, so there's less waste. And they're also formulated in a way that the food ingredients going into the fish are healthy and have less and less fish in them. So another sustainability thing that people worried about for years, and it's becoming increasingly less of a concern, is that a lot of what you feed fish comes from other fish, fish oil and fish meal. And that content in fish food has decreased dramatically. And that's been all through innovation and science that has taken place partly in federal labs and partly in the private sector at the same time. So we're providing the science and technological advancements that allow firms to be able to produce cost effectively a sustainable, responsibly sourced seafood product in the United States. We have enormous growth opportunity for aquaculture in the U.S. Fish farming and shellfish, all forms of farmed seafood products, has been growing rapidly across the world. Another aspect of these markets that we often don't know is that the output from the oceans in terms of wild seafood products has been flat for decades. And all the growth in demand on a global basis has come through farm products. And we just haven't been doing proportionally as much of that in the United States as other countries have. So imported, farmed, wild, from a health point of view, seafood is good. Anything that gets into this country is coming through a regulatory system that you can count on it, and good supply chain management and improvements on a regular basis with traceability so that people can be assured of the quality of what they're buying. We just want to make more local options available to people. People want to know that seafood's good for the planet. They also like to know where it came from. And, I live in the coastal zone and I love to support our local fishermen and our local oyster growers. I go to farm markets a good portion of the year, and our local seafood vendors are there. And that's becoming increasingly a great entree for people, is they want local. Local kind of lost its place at the table. And we want to bring that back. So among the array of great seafood choices, as you were all talking about earlier, there's enormous variety in this sector. We'd like there to be more local. Imports aren't undesirable. We want more diverse and want to have greater opportunity for U.S. seafood growers and U.S. seafood harvesters to sell into the U.S. market. And that benefits everybody. It benefits the people producing the product, and it benefits the consumers who get a really high quality, sustainable, healthy seafood product. And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do.
And as we're talking about farmed fish, I wanted to share that I was fortunate enough to take a trip to Norway. It was a sponsored trip, and I got to see farmed salmon firsthand. I stood on the edge of the salmon pen, and it was one of the most amazing experiences in my life. I learned so much, but I would love for you to speak to that as well.
You're lucky. It's a wonderful country to visit, and they have a very sophisticated industry there and have been leaders in sustainable fish production for quite some time. A lot of the salmon product that you find in the United States is coming from the very type of farm that you saw in the Norwegian fjords. Interestingly, they've been investing more and more in the United States and trying to figure out ways to produce here, including in onshore facilities, which we haven't talked about. Recirculating systems are one of the potentially wonderful future forms of producing fish. A lot of fish are started in recirculating systems and finished in net pens like you saw, and that's the current state of the art. But the Norwegians are investing, and increasingly some folks based in this country are as well, are looking at next generation production in recirculating systems and in offshore systems. So the science system and the technology development in Norway is extraordinary. They have a fantastic salmon industry, and I think most U.S. consumers have probably had the benefit of tasting some of that type of product. It's a part of a very diverse salmon market. We have extraordinary wild capture markets in the United States. Salmon, and it's different types of products. Same name, but very different types of products. And I think altogether, you combine those in the U.S. marketplace, and you're offering consumers a lot of great choices.
Yeah, so it kind of speaks to the global nature of the industry itself. And I know that the work you do kind of connects this industry together. And I see with the Seafood Nutrition Partnership that it's helping bring a variety of entities together and make improvements across the board.
That's indeed the ticket, if you will. And the Seafood Nutrition Partnership has just done a fabulous job. And Eat Seafood America is one recent example of that, where they've brought just an extraordinary array of organizations together, around the very simple but powerful message that seafood is good for Americans to consume. And there's a whole story behind what it takes to produce high-quality seafood. And I think, in our country, we define state-of-the-art for sure when it comes to science-based, conservation-oriented management of our wild stocks. And we'd like to be similarly the global standard for farm seafood product as well. And as consumers benefit more, we need to make sure we're meeting that demand with sustainable seafood supply. And that's what we're focused on at NOAA Fisheries.
We know it's good for our bodies, and now we have a better understanding of how it is good for the planet. And, we can't forget the economy. And that's really, I think, how, and I believe you mentioned this earlier, Linda, how the Eat Seafood America movement came about is to really share information about those three pillars, if you will. So can we talk a little bit more about the Eat Seafood America movement? I know that there's tons of information on the seafoodnutrition.org. There's a tab specifically for Eat Seafood America. And I know that there's images and content that people can, share out on social media. But tell us more about the campaign.
It's really been a growing movement that so many people have come on board to support. All the information is available on our website, and there's a short link to, you can just go to eatseafoodamerica.com, and that'll take you to all the resources that we have. This movement started last October. What we do is we provide resources for consumers, health influencers, our coalition partners, folks in the industry to utilize. There are communications toolkits, if you will, that are produced every 8 weeks. They come with different themes and ideas and recipes for people to just reshare on their own social channels. If people just want to reshare from the Seafood Nutrition Partnership's website and social media, they can just follow the handle seafood4health on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also find us on YouTube. You can just easily reshare it on your own channels and hashtag Eat Seafood America. With the campaign, we are asking all of our partners to share this message, and we're also conducting an integrated communications campaign as well through digital to reach Americans that love seafood and want to try and eat it more often. And so we're trying to find them through social media to make sure that they see these recipes. We're also generating earned media and getting picked up, in different outlets as well. So you'll see our videos in different TV stations. They're mostly shown in lifestyle channels and morning news programs. And so that's another way for people to find great content, when they're viewing their morning news. All in all, last year, we generated over 600 million impressions. We've seen that we've been able to have people learn more about seafood. And what we found through our consumer surveys with each activation wave that we do is that those that have seen the Eat Seafood America campaign are 3 to 4 times more likely to eat seafood more often. And they're also more likely to try and learn more about seafood and add it more to their diets. And so we're really encouraged that this campaign is working and that more and more people are joining this movement. And so I hope people will sign up and go to Eat Seafood America and just try seafood, and also email us if there's ever any questions. We have our email addresses on the website to provide recommendations, and know that they're helping their health as well as our wonderful seafood economy. I do want to just tag on a little bit to what Paul said, and I think sum it up that seafood nutrition is sustainable nutrition. More and more these days, we're finding that eating seafood is really part of the planet-friendly diet. There's just lower greenhouse gas emissions, lower impacts of climate change when you're eating seafood. And so you can feel really good about eating seafood for your own health as well as our planet's health.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for sharing those websites and the social media handles. I'll have links to all of that in my show notes at soundbitesrd.com. I know there's some sustainability info on seafoodnutrition.org, but Paul, do you want to share? I know that NOAA Fisheries Sustainable Seafood page, it's kind of a long URL, so I'll have that linked in my show notes to make it easy for people. Do you want to share with our listeners what people can find on the NOAA sites?
The sites that you are going to link people to are great sources of information, and in particular, our seafood by species. So we get a lot of information there around the nature of the fish, where it's caught, what kinds of attributes are attributed to those particular species. So there's wonderful information about where the fish come from, the sort of features that we were talking about in terms of sustainability. And I think gives consumers a great overview of the variety of sustainably sourced seafood in the United States, both wild capture as well as farm product. So there's great information there where you can kind of navigate and learn a lot about the sort of diverse seafood options that we were talking about earlier in our discussion, and have a good sense of what kinds of seafood products are produced in the United States and that you can rely so much on when it comes to sustainability and overall health impacts from purchasing and consuming.
Okay, thank you. One more quick thing before we wrap up. I'm going to ask both of you to share your favorite way to enjoy seafood. But just briefly, Linda, I know that the Dietary Guidelines does mention about mercury in fish, and I don't think that's as much of a concern, but I think that that's another reason to encourage variety. But I'd like you to speak to that just in case people are wondering about mercury in fish.
Yeah, the Dietary Guidelines does recommend for moms-to-be to eat seafood that's higher in omega-3s and lower in mercury. The FDA and EPA have a pregnancy guidance as well and show you the best choice for eating low mercury fish. And 90% of the seafood that we have in the U.S. is low mercury, according to the FDA EPA resources. You know, it's really easy for moms-to-be to find seafood that's high in omega-3s. The mercury concern is just for pregnant and expecting moms. It's not a concern for the general population. So for the general population, you know, you can eat seafood twice a week or more and not have those concerns. You really are getting the benefits. And something that people should also understand is there's selenium in seafood that counteracts mercury. And so something interesting to note is for the fish species that have mercury concern, they have more mercury than selenium. And so there's only about 4 species that are of concern: big-eyed tuna, swordfish, king mackerel, and orange roughy. So besides those 4 species, all the other species of seafood, I forgot to mention shark. Shark is another one of concern. But besides those species, you really have just a wide variety of seafood to choose from.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the materials, you have so many wonderful resources on your site, but the one that really jumped out at me was the twice-a-week game plan. So I'm going to link to that in my show notes. And one of the things on there that I've never thought of is, well, first of all, you have to make a game plan.
Right.
Seafood's not just going to magically appear on your plate if you don't plan it out. Go to the store, buy it, and figure out how you're going to prepare it. But the one thing I really liked was plug in the slow cooker. I don't think I've ever made seafood in a slow cooker. I like slow cooker stuff, so I'm going to try that. So I'd love to hear both of you share your favorite way to enjoy seafood. Linda, I know you shared some great suggestions earlier, but I'd like to hear your personal favorite, and then also from you, Paul.
You know, I love it all. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm eating seafood every day. A couple of my favorites are to steam whitefish in a bamboo basket, and it's so healthy. And you just, pour over a mixture of a little bit of soy sauce, sesame seed oil, some garlic and ginger, and put that over white rice. And, one of my favorites that I'm going to try and perfect is the seafood bouillabaisse. It's in a tomato sauce with lots of different fish. You can put salmon and cod and pollock, shrimp, everything. You can put it in all and make a wonderful brothy kind of stew that is great for this time of year, and add some crusty bread grilled, with a little bit of garlic rubbed on it. Those are some of my favorite ways to eat seafood.
And Paul?
Well, at the risk of sounding overly simplistic, one of my absolute favorite things is to just bring home a dozen local oysters, open them, and have straight up oysters with a beer. Just as far as I'm concerned, that's a great way to start the evening. And it's a regular treat in our household. I also really enjoy grilling fish. Some of the kind of heavier fish that survive well on the grill. I'm a particular fan of grilling swordfish. It's a wonderful, sustainably managed species, a great supply. And of course, just about any and all type of salmon. It's just a wonderful fish and extraordinarily healthy for you, and you can prepare it a million ways. It's interesting. You started off noting your couple of preparations, which sounded lovely with a salmon that you received from Seafood Nutrition Partnership. And I have yet to find, frankly, any form of seafood that I didn't like. I'm trying to experiment more and more with bringing in seafood salads. I'm particularly always trying to master the art of the fish taco. There's a million ways you can do that with all kinds of different types of fish. So it's just fun to try new things. There's wonderful cookbooks out there. I'm a friend of Barton Seaver, and he's always out there trying to, in the culinary community, draw greater attention to just the incredible variety of things that you can do with seafood. And it really doesn't need to be extravagant or hard. It's all very accessible and fun to experiment with. So it's a favorite for me, particularly on the weekends, to spend some time with a new creation.
It can be so simple, but then, you can have fun and experiment and get creative with it. So the options are endless. Well, I just want to thank both of you so much for sharing all of this wonderful information and all the resources that you have for people who want to take a deeper dive into the topic. I will have links in my show notes at soundbitesrd.com, but we've shared some of the sites and the social media handles already. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. It's just been wonderful to connect with you, and always a pleasure to join Linda in a discussion about the benefits of seafood, how it's produced, and the benefits of consuming it. And it's just been a real pleasure today to talk with you, and hope we have the opportunity to do so again in the future.
Same here, Melissa. It's been great chatting with you. And hopefully after we're able to meet again, we'll be able to take some tours of some seafood locations, with catchers and seafood farmers, and fishermen all around the country together.
That would be wonderful. I miss visiting farms and learning more about agriculture and aquaculture in person. It's an amazing learning experience, and I would love to do that. And for everybody listening, join the hashtag Eat Seafood America movement. And as always, enjoy your food with health in mind. Till next time.
For more information, visit soundbitesrd.com. Music by Dave Burke, produced by Jag in Detroit Podcasts.